Hi, folks. This is Mark by Mark A. Foster, Ph.D. for the Maoist-Third Worldist Collective. In this podcast, I want to address the subject of my own journey. Relatively recent journey. I'm not going to go all the way back. That would really bore you. But my journey from Third Worldism back to Third Worldism. That's what I'm going to be talking about. How I started out as a Maoist Third Worldist around the year 2000, roughly, and then left it, and then came back to it in June. So, what happened? Well, a number of things happened, to be honest. It's not a simple thing. I am and always have been a very careful thinker as an academic. I don't make haphazard decisions. My decisions are always very well thought out. And that was certainly the case here. I was a third worldist initially, but my knowledge of third worldism was really limited. I was just drawn to it. I was drawn to it. Primarily, I was drawn to the podcasts of Jason Unruh, a man whom I hold tremendous respect for and whom I now consider to be a close friend. And I hope he thinks of me as a close friend too. But at that time, I really did not know Jason. Had no direct correspondence with him. It was only thinking about the issue in my head. I cared about the third world. I genuinely cared about it. I had been to the third world, as I have discussed in previous podcasts, prior to moving down here to the Rio Grande Valley of Texas. When I was in Kinshasa in Central Africa, and I saw the immense poverty that existed in that place, dead bodies in the streets, and I literally could not conceive of how anybody could realistically accept that as the status quo. And yet, that's precisely what seemed to happen. I remember walking down the street, the main business street in Kinshasa, which looks like any city in Europe. And I was walking down with this other guy who had been in Kinshasa for a long time. And I saw all these bodies in the street. And I didn't know what they were. Were they dead? Were they sleeping? So I asked him, I said, those bodies are the people sleeping? Then he turned to me and he said, no, Mark, they're dead. That was a genuine awakening for me. Born and raised in New York City, I had never seen that kind of thing before. Never. Maybe I'd seen it on the news, but to actually be walking amongst those dead bodies on the street, no. I had never been in that kind of situation previously. So that was very, very depressing. Very, very depressing for me, even though at the time, as an autistic, I had still not developed empathy. Somehow, I managed to have tremendous emotion, and I don't know how. At knowing that these were deceased bodies that were laying in the street. Very, very sad. So I knew what the third world was like directly. A lot of people never see the third world directly. Or sadly, when they go to a third world country, they will often go with a tourist group. As a result, they really won't see the actual third world. They will see the parts of the third world that the tourist organizers want people to see, which does not include those dead bodies. But I saw them. I was not with a tourist group. I was there to do civil rights work. So I saw the harsh reality of what life was for people in Kinshasa. It was unimaginably depressing. I would not wish that on anyone. Ordinarily, I might say, well, you should go there and see it for yourself, but there's a part of me that says, no, I don't want to say that. I just don't want to say that. I mean, if you want to see it, you can see it. But I don't want to be the person to encourage you. It's a real tragedy. People dying of starvation and simply dropping dead in the street. What do you say? Okay. So eventually, actually it was years later, but with the memory of that event in Kinshasa still very much at the front of my mind, I became a Maoist third worldist around the year 2000. If you watched my previous podcast, you know that I also became a critical realist at approximately the same time. For reasons that are still not entirely clear to me, I left Maoism-Third worldism. And I began associating myself with three other tendencies over the next decade. One was also Maoist, but it was a very watered down version of Maoism. Their focus was on left refoundation. They were trying to basically unite people from different left-wing groups together. Basically, they were social democrats. Maybe some of them would claim to be communists, but if they were to claim that, I think they'd be lying. I also became an international socialist for a while, which is the Trotskyist tendency that was started by Tony Cliff in England. Tony Cliff was born in what was then Palestine. He emigrated to England, never actually became a British citizen. He tried. but because of his communism, he was never accepted as a UK citizen, or I guess at that time it would have been called a UK subject. And then finally, I became a third campist. Now, third campism is a kind of heterodox Trotskyism. Now, the word heterodox, hetero from the same root as heterosexual, heterogeneous, means different. Different. Doesn't mean wrong. Does not mean wrong. It means different. Doxy is related to the word doctrine in Latin. So different doctrine, meaning that third campists disagreed with Trotsky, and Trotsky strongly disagreed with third campists. He devoted a portion of his books to attacking third campism. That's how much hostility he had toward it, in spite of the fact, which is confusing, but whatever. Trotsky himself had developed a version of third campism, not exactly the same, but pretty darn close, about 30 years earlier. But I mean, we all change our minds. That's human nature. We change our minds. So he abandoned that. He did not like the direction that third campism was going in, and so there was a split. It was a split, and third campists became cut off from the mainstream of Trotskyism in the U.S. Initially, third campism was started in the US. It then spread. So, for example, now there are 3 third campist organizations. One is Solidarity, which is here in the US. The second is Workers' Liberty in the UK. And the third is Workers' Liberty in Australia. The 2 Workers' Liberties are connected, but obviously in different countries. They cooperate. There's no hostility between those different organizations. They agree on basically everything, as far as I know. Now, for some reason, I did not join Solidarity until my last 2 or 3 months, I think, as a third campist. And I believe that was because I had developed my own variation of third campism, and I didn't see a point to join another organization. But toward the end of the time that I called myself a third campist, I decided to join Solidarity, but that was like 2 or 3 months. That's it. And I left. I didn't fit. Okay. So, why did I leave Maoism-Third Worldism? I don't know. I really don't know. I've tossed that idea back and forth in my head, and I literally cannot think of an answer that makes sense to me. I can't. But I did. And I became a part of 3 first worldist organizations, the ones I mentioned. Maoism-Third Worldism, at least the Maoism-Third Worldism that I am a part of, is not a formal organization. It's more of a of an informal association of comrades. The inspiration is the great autodidact Jason Unruh, whom I have a tremendous amount of respect and love for, and I will admire him for the rest of my life. I hope he knows that. But that was, for the time, my end in Maoism-Third Worldism and my excursion into First Worldism again, which I was actually in before I was a Maoist Third Worldist. Different types of First Worldism, though. When I began thinking about a place to move, when I was about to retire, I knew I was about to retire. I wanted to leave Kansas to be in a warmer climate. I could have retired, I guess, to Florida. I could have retired to parts of Arizona, which are pretty warm, even in the winter. There are some not Tucson or Phoenix, but there are some parts of Arizona that are pretty warm year round. So I could have retired there, but I was drawn to Mexico. I was drawn back to the third world. Even though at that time I still thought of myself as a third campist. I guess I was beginning to return to Maoism-Third Worldism. And so, actually, before I retired, I got permission from the college to spend my last term teaching classes using distance learning from here in Texas, as we say here, deep South Texas. Once in a while, I would have a student say, "Can I come by and meet you during your office hours?" And I say, "Well, if you want to take a drive down to Texas," they would laugh, whatever. But I was already down here. Where I live, as many of you I'm sure know, is 2 miles north of Mexico. That was no accident. I came here because it was 2 miles north of Mexico. I wanted to return, or to come to, I should say, an area right near the third world, even though I had not yet, in my heart, fully returned to Maoism-Third Worldism, although that happened very soon afterwards. So, in June of this year, 2023, I woke up and I wasn't the same person. I realized that I was now a Maoist Third Worldist again, literally after I woke up. Literally after I woke up. I was not the same person in terms of my Marxist viewpoints. I was once again a Maoist Third Worldist. And I was filled with joy. Literally filled with joy. Overwhelmingly happy. Okay. So, let's go back a little bit and talk about what is Maoism Third Worldism, what is third campism, primarily, and why I went from being a third campist back to being a Maoist third worldist. It's complicated. Maybe not that complicated. Maybe not that complicated. When third campism in its modern form started was around the period of World War II. There were several figures that were associated with it. The two that I mostly identify with, I suppose, are Max Shachtman and Hal Draper. Max Shachtman actually left third campism and got a job working for the AFL-CIO as a union organizer, although he continued to regard himself as a third campus, but kind of a watered down version. He basically became a social democrat. He was no longer a communist. But to this day, there are still some people who identify with third campists, or I should say third campism, who associate themselves with Max Shachtman. But for all intents and purposes, Hal Draper picked up the ball and ran with it. The term socialism from below was coined by Draper. I have nothing against Hal Draper. For who he is, who he was, what he knew, the situations in his life at the time, he was a heroic man. I think he made the wrong decision to be a third campist, but I'm not attacking him. I would never attack him at all. No reason to attack a person. That's not my style. But when I went back and looked at the writings of Shachtman and Draper, I could not find a single reference to the third world. And that is, I think, only understandable when you understand the history of third campism. When third campism started during World War II, there were 3 camps. Seems like third campus liked the number 3. I have no idea why. It's like 333. Makes no sense to me, but whatever. There were 3 camps, World War II. First camp were the Allied powers, which, as many people know, included both the US and the Soviet Union. The US and the Soviet Union were allies in World War II. World War II ended, and Stalin wanted to maintain that alliance. He wanted to continue a friendship with the US, with Europe, with Canada, and so forth. It was the West, it was the first world which turned him down. We turned him down. We turned him down. We started the Cold War, not the Soviet Union. It was started by the first world. It was started by the first world. There was no reason for it. We could have had a good relationship with Stalin, but well, I should say I wasn't around then, but the West, the first world, said no. Weird. To me, even though I have some understanding of the logic behind it, it still strikes me as being incomprehensible. So I have that kind of conflicting dynamic in my head. Okay, with the end of the Allied powers, meaning that the West and the Soviet Union were no longer in relationship, with the end of Nazi Germany, with the end of fascist Italy, with the end of imperialist Germany. Obviously, there was no more Axis powers either. So the Axis pact fell apart as well. So there was a complete realignment after World War II. But still, you come back to those three, right? The ever-present three, which again, I don't understand that, but that's a theme. The new three, the new third camps were NATO, the Warsaw Pact, which of course was headed by the Soviet Union, and the proletariat. The proletariat and also the subaltern were part of all three stages of the three camps, even during World War II. They were always the third camp, and that remained after World War II. Then, I mean, I remember this. Many of you probably don't, but I mean, I lived through. I mean, I'm an old guy. I'm 67. I'll be 68 in 2 months. I'm an old guy, so I remember this stuff. I remember when Gorbachev started perestroika, glasnost. Basically, what ended up, I should say, as the dismantling of the Soviet Union. Maybe that was not Mikhail Gorbachev's intention originally. Maybe it was. I don't know. But that was the result. The Soviet Union was dismantled. So, once again, the three camps appear again, except they're modified. Well, the third camp stays the same, the proletariat and the subaltern, but now the first camp is NATO. I mean, it was NATO before, it's still NATO. And the second camp now is the Republic of Russia. So that's the way it is right now. If I could understand that fetish for three, it might make more sense. Because to me, if I were designing camps, I would not design them that way. Honestly, I'm not going to get into how I would design them, but certainly I would not design them that way. But whatever. That was the end of the three camps as they existed during the Cold War, and the start of a new third camp structure in our post-Cold War age. And here we are, still in that age. That's where we are, at least for now. Maybe there'll be a new three, who knows? Regardless, the situation in the world today with these three camps, when I began to reflect upon them, is what confused me. Where is there a discussion of the third world? It's not. It's not. When most third camp Trotskyists, heterodox Trotskyists, I guess their hetero is different, dox is from doctrine, so different doctrine. When they conceive of the proletariat and the subaltern, I can tell by reading their literature that they're not talking about the third world. Primarily, maybe a little bit, but primarily they're talking about the first world. The proletariat in North America, in Europe, in Australia, in New Zealand, in Japan, not in most of Africa, not in most of Latin America. So it's a Western-centric vision of communism. It's a first world form of communism. When I finally recognized that, when I was forced by circumstances to confront it, and I was already here when that happened. I was already living here 2 miles from Mexico. Why? Because I wanted to be near the third world. That was the kind of mental conflict I was going through. I wanted to be near the third world, and yet I was a first worldist again. One morning, I woke up and I rejected third campism. And I was once again a third worldist, a Maoist third worldist. And that's the way it's been ever since. So I have returned to the, I'm not sure what to call it, the tendency or maybe sub-tendency, subcurrent that, in my mind, is run by Jason Unruh. Now, Jason may not like to see himself as the person running it, but I see him in that light. I mean, I love the guy. I'm surely one of his greatest fans. He is a truly wonderful man, self-sacrificial. He has sacrificed himself to make so many podcasts over so many years, and he's still making them. Formally, he has ended Maoist Rebel News. The site is still there as of now. He may change it, but for now it's still there. But he will always, in my head, be the head of my tendency or subtendency. There's no way that I can see him in any other light. He is a truly wonderful human being. In spite of the fact that he's young enough to be my son, I'm 25 years older than he is. I don't think of that when I talk with him. I just think of him as Jason. You know, he's my comrade. He's my brother. But when I sit back and I realize, I think, oh my God, I'm 67, almost 68 years old. I don't really care that much. When I die, I die. Nobody really knows when they'll die. In any event, I hope that was somewhat clarifying to explain why I returned to third worldism. Coming down here, realizing the flaws in third campism, recognizing that I had made a mistake in leaving Maoism-Third worldism the first time, and returning to it back in June of this year. It is more than I deserve. And that is not hyperbole. I literally mean that. It is much, much more than I will ever deserve. But I'm grateful. For the time being, this is Mark by Mark A. Foster, Ph.D. Have a pleasant day and an even better day tomorrow.